Hi guys, and welcome to Pen and Pencil Academy. Before we start the video, make sure that you've hit that subscribe button and turned on your notifications. In this video, we are going to look at trigonometry. And first of all, we're going to go through sine, cos, and tan. And the first thing that we need to know is how to label our triangles. So here we have a right angle triangle. And the first thing that we need to know and make sure that we do whenever we look at these triangles is that if it's a right angle triangle, we need to use these three golden rules. Yeah, I'm going to go through them. So the first thing that we do is we need to understand how to label the triangles, otherwise the formulas won't work. So the first thing we do is we look at where the angle is. So here's x and here's the right angle. And the easiest thing that we can label is the hypotenuse, which is the longest side of this triangle. So we'll call that h. And then we can label the opposite side. So the opposite to the angle is this one here. And the last thing that we label is the adjacent side on this triangle. Now this might seem to be the hardest side to label, because sometimes the triangles are drawn in such a way that you can't identify the adjacent side. So it's always best, is what I think, that you should label hypotenuse and then the opposite and then the adjacent. So I'm just going to go through 3 examples of different triangles that we could have and just label them. So here are 3 different right angle triangles. And we can see that they all have an angle and the right angles are labeled. So let's do the first one. We can see that the longest side here is the hypotenuse, so we'll label that h. And then we can look for the opposite side. So if the angle is here, the opposite it would be here. And finally, we've got the adjacent. Now, this one is tricky to look at the adjacent if we didn't label the hypotenuse and the opposite side, because it's not very clear to see. But as we look here, if we look over here, the adjacent side is always next to the angle, and that's the same case over here. Now, if we look here, this is just the opposite of this one. So the hypotenuse would be here, the opposite is here, and the adjacent is here. Now, this last triangle is drawn in a very similar way to this one, but the angle is up here. So if we look for the hypotenuse is here, it's the longest side. The opposite is over here this time, which means the adjacent is here. So now we are going to look at the actual formula, or the formulas given for sine, cos, and tan. So here we've got the 3 formulas. Sine of x would be the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cos of x is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tan of x is opposite over adjacent. Now, there's a lot of words here, and it can look quite confusing, but we can also write it like this. So we could just say that sine x is O over h. So if we look back over here, if we wanted the x value, so if we wanted the angle, and we were given the opposite side length and the hypotenuse length, we would use the sine formula. If we had the angle and we had the adjacent value and the hypotenuse value, we would have cos of x would be equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And if we were given the opposite and the adjacent, we would have to use tan of x. So these are the 3 trig rules that you should remember. And just in one word, you could say SOHCAHTOA. So if I write that out, it'll be easier to understand. So you can see how sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine, cos of x, is adjacent over the hypotenuse. And tan is opposite over adjacent. So that was the 3 golden trig rules for sine, cos and tan that you need to know for your GCSE maths. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching.